Good morning. Now the next video I wanted to do is a request from user Lee on one of my videos who asked about creating custom schedules. I tinkered with doing this back when I was making schedules in Tower 3D Pro, but ultimately I decided not to because better options came along, so I'm going to succinctly go through a couple of things here. First and foremost, the best and most simplistic way to get into making custom schedules is to use a tool created by Eli Grimm. You can see he's got the link up still right now. This is the URL builder.eligrimm.de. And in this, for Tower 3D Pro, ignore that aspect of it. But for Tower 3D Pro, you come in here and you can add some basic settings and you will export whatever you need for the airports. So you've got how to support the project, version history, author's notes, blah, 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 blah. And he links out to some other tools such as schedule information, call sign information, which is one that I referenced in my playthrough video that I wish I'd had up because you just punch in the call sign and it tells you who they are, which can be very helpful if you don't catch when they say or the computer doesn't speak very well. So, start creating. In this, you pick your airport. Let's just say DFW for giggles. Now again, these are all the airports that are available in Tower 3D Pro. We'll come to that. I know the question is for Tower Simulator 3, but again, we'll get there. Next, you pick the number of hours. I typically only played 1 hour. You pick your start time, simply decide what time of day you want, and then you can customize the number of movements per hour. And there is a help file here that basically explains, hey, how many do you want? And then it gives you the effect and kind of what to expect out of that, which is pretty nice. So 126 movements in 1 hour, that seems pretty busy. Now, weigh the departures and arrivals. This is an awesome setting that allows you to stack it towards departures, stack it towards arrival. That's basically all departures, that's basically all arrivals, and then you can equal it in the middle or stack it back and forth. So midday, I think it would be fairly equal, but if I'm doing 6 a.m., oh boy, that's going to be stacked towards departures. However, if I'm doing 7 p.m., ooh, that's going to be stacked towards arrivals. So you can customize the system very nicely for that. Now, the realism was basically based on the entirety of the real schedules of several weeks. So he basically downloaded a bunch of real world traffic from this, or he can add some variety into it to make it kind of more fun and playable. I typically like the variety, which means that if I'm playing DFW, I might get some airplanes that don't typically fly to DFW in the quantities I would receive them, or they may not fly to DFW at all. And for me, it wasn't about the accuracy of the plane types as long as they existed somewhere in the world. It was just fun to have a ton of planes to control and to get one or two unique ones in there. Next, you can have GA, General Aviation. Now, DFW Airport's not really going to have a lot of GA, so it'd be low. There are a few business area jets that might fly out of there, but it's going to be very low nonetheless. You can add maneuvers for GA flights. I tried this once. I never quite got it working. I think this was more a problem with the game than it was anything else, but I kind of gave up on that. Next, you can tweak the GA call signs, which was Kurt. I forget what this means, but they basically just add the first letters instead of basically saying November 634 Delta. It just kind of trims it down more and more and more, just to make it a little easier. If you're in different parts of the world, then it cuts out the Charlie, Foxtrot, Delta, Echo, Mike that you might have to speak. So it just made it a little easier instead of the tongue twister having to speak the Charlie and the dash and all that. And again, just made it a little easier to deal with. Now, Retro Airlines was an additional pack that Neargy's Design did put out, where it added retro colors and some other stuff and liveries to the airplanes. I would leave this off. I didn't buy it, so whatever. I didn't care. Once you've done that, you generate the timetable. It'll do its thing, and suddenly it gives you a call out of what's going on. If you've messed something up, or you've overstacked something, then expect some of these to be red or yellow just to highlight that, hey, you might want to adjust your settings here because this is going to be nuts. So you can see here on the volume, it's planned to include 81 arrivals and 45 departures in the first hour. That's not too bad for DFW, so this can easily go up. But again, if you take something too far, make it a little more difficult, then it's going to call out that there's going to be an issue. Once you're done, you're able to build my schedule. And then you can download the necessary files. So basically it's a zip, and then you download some of the sorted text files that will come with it. And then keep the server clean means you delete this because it's sitting on his server and you don't need it. Now when you download this, it's just going to give you a bunch of the raw text files. What we looked at in the configuration of the Tower Simulator 3, we looked at the schedule, we looked at the terminal file, we looked at the GA file, we looked at the airlines file, and there's even a liveries file. All of that stuff is what he's packing and giving to you that you install into each individual airport. So if you create a schedule on here for LAX, then you would drop it into all the files into your LAX accordingly and replace the ones that are there, which is why it is very highly recommended that you make a backup of your game files before you do this, at least your airports folder. That way if you mess something up or you want to go back to the default, you just drop it in, drop the folder in place and replace everything. No big deal. We'll probably come back to that in a minute, but for now I'm going to wipe this off. Now again, this is for Tower 3D Pro. This is not for Tower Simulator 3, and I'll explain why that's not really that big of a deal here in just a couple of minutes. So with that said, let's jump into how I actually made my own schedules for the game and how that would still work in the game now. It's a lot more of a headache and a lot more of a hassle, which is kind of why I stopped. Not because I can't, not because I don't enjoy it, but because it was very time consuming to go through and do. But that's just the way it works. So here we go. First things first, I came to FlightAware, which is a free tracking software. There are others out there, but FlightAware gives you the data you need for free, or at least enough of it that you can get by, whereas some of the others like Flight Radar and others require a subscription to get all that. So hey, is what it is. Now I just did DFW, so I'm just going to do KDFW again. No, there we go. I don't know why it's not finding. Maybe if I could type Dallas Fort Worth. All right, so wow, that is quite the departure delay, but it is very high winds and extremely freezing here right now. So down here, when I scroll down, it gives me a listing of my arrivals and my departures and when they departed. So first, I'm going to control click on each one of these to open them in a new tab. And it looks like they've paywalled it now, which kind of stinks. But well, they paywalled it. That is really unfortunate. I haven't come on here in a long time to do this. Maybe I can get it from somewhere else, or maybe you just have to get a subscription to it to pay for it. That is unfortunate. Maybe there's another way around it, but essentially what I would do is I would open that and it would give me the time frame, and I would basically just highlight all of these fields and copy paste them into Excel. Because this is a table, it would automatically separate these into individual cells, and then I would just hit the back button and the back button and go through all 24 hours of a given day for the arrivals. Then I would repeat it for the departures and get all the departures. As you can imagine, at a busy airport, that can take a bit of time, but it was very helpful. What you needed to know in these was which day are you going to pick. Some people would do full week schedules, some people would do just a day. I typically did just a day because, again, it took a while. Now, I'm not going to purport to be an Excel wizard. I know my way around Excel, I use it frequently, but I am not what I would consider a power user. Again, I apologize about this. I have not looked at FlightAware data in this regard. I've tracked flights, but I haven't come in here to dump oodles of data that I would have noticed you need to actually now pay for the data. But it is what it is, and that's very expensive to buy the whole report. Anyway, Again, there may be other ways to do it, and that's something to think about in the future, but I would recommend using Eli Grimm's service because it's free and extremely good. So, with that said, this is my Excel file. Now, this might look like cat vomit, but it worked for my mentality, and I'll kind of walk you through what I did in this. So on the left side here, you will see my copy paste out of FlightAware. This is going to be my arrivals raw, which is what the underscore means. And this is just every plane that came into the airport for that time. And you can imagine 20 listings per page, 1,037 entries here. Yeah, I skipped a line. Anyway, so about 1,037, 36 entries all manually copied in. So that is a lot of work to do. But this data itself cannot be used. You have to groom the data and clean it up and format it for what the game expects and what the game needs. And beyond that, you can make most of this data up. You can copy paste it from other schedules, you can modify it, you can play with it to your heart's content once you kind of understand what everything means. So these columns through F are the original data that existed in the game. This, I believe, was the planned arrival, and this was the actual arrival. So some of these planes were a bit late that were coming in, if I recall correctly. Might be this was actually their departure. Miami to DFW, hour and a half. Yeah, going backwards. Okay, yeah, sorry. This was their departure from Miami. This was their arrival at DFW. So, time frames. So the first thing I started doing was stripping out all the information here that I don't need so that I can get this actual tag for the airport, which is what the game needs. And we'll come back to these international ones that are a bit of a mess. So starting with Miami. Now, if you look at the top, I just created a bunch of cells filled with formulas in case I forgot one or deleted one, or if an airport didn't actually need it, I could just grab it from the top. It's messy, but again, I didn't build this to be pretty. I made it to work. So the first one that I'm looking at here on J is taking cell C3 here. I'm grabbing the information, and I want to delete the information to the left of anything, of the open bracket. So basically I'm finding the open bracket first, and then I'm removing the stuff to the left of that open bracket, including the bracket, which is what leaves me with this, KMIA close bracket. And then I'm basically repeating the same thing for the close bracket and deleting just that one entry, which gives me the clean airport code. However, when we come down to some of these that have slashes in them, oh boy, does it mess the whole formula up. It still kind of works, but then I have to change the formula and try to strip that information out, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that really can create a headache where you have to mess with your formula and tweak it a bit, which again is just a copy paste come down, and that's what you can see right here, where now I'm searching for the slash and then deleting it, and I left it open to input the number of cells I'm deleting. So, and you basically just scroll through the entire thing. Here's one. There you go. So this one is one that I needed to correct. I think I corrected it manually because it just wasn't worth my time to come through the list and redo the formula. If there were several in a row, I'd do the formula. If not, then I would manually fix it on the right. That's basically how I started it. Now, the game doesn't use the K or the C or anything like that. It just uses the 3 identifiers, not the country identifier, which means there's more to strip out. So again, here we go. Another cell. Now I'm cleaning this one. Start by taking out the first entry on the left. Okay, no big deal. I'm just deleting the K or the C, and that gives me the information. The 2 field I don't have to do anything with because, well, I'm setting up for DFW, so they're all arriving at DFW. No big deal. The plane listing is over here in column B, and if you see what I'm doing, it's just a simple V lookup. And what this is doing is pulling my airplanes table here, which is listing all of the real world entries here on the left, and then the Tower 3D Pro entries on the right. Some of these had to be customized, modified. Some of these I had to spend quite a while poring over internet images to try and figure out, especially the smaller props like, let me see this. What the heck is an SF-34? No idea. Typically, I could find images of them in Google. Other times I couldn't. Sometimes I had to then take the flight number into FlightAware to figure out what type of plane it was using, or if it could give me the speed, because that would tell me if it's a jet or a prop or even a turboprop or something like that. That would give me a better idea to try and be more accurate in the game. And that was just what I did. So most of the ones that are here are the ones that I kind of customized and added or in some way tweaked. And you can see I had to add a lot of different things. There were even some government airplanes that came in. I do not remember what they all are, but I just had to say this is what it's going to be. So here's an example of a plane. I don't remember what it is, but I called it out as a Cessna jet, business jet, so no big deal. A couple others that just came through, and that's the way it works. You just go through all of that and give it there. And then I don't know why that one's aligned to the left, but whatever, is what it is. Airline. First thing I'm doing with the airline is stripping out the numbers on the right side, and then I'm taking the same cell and stripping out the letters on the left side. That way it splits it into the airline and the flight number. Arrival time, I have two entries here. First one is going to be stripping out the CDT and a space at the end of it. And then the other portion is going to be cleaning out some of the Monday and the space at the front of it, which gives me just the actual time. Now this empty cell here is the departure time, which in the game is just a default of 12 noon if it's a departure, and you'll have the arrival time. And then when you're doing departures, this flips. In Tower 3D Pro, they just had this default number. I don't recall what it did. I used to know, but since I haven't messed with this in 2 years plus, I don't care. And then in the game, all the airlines had a short identifier. So I'm doing another VLOOKUP on the airlines column in here, which lists all the information for the airlines. And you basically just had to find the full ICAO number to get the IATA number. There's a few of these I ended up adding just because they didn't exist. I don't remember which ones are which in this one, but that's just the way it went. And this, if you can see where I started labeling the headers, gives me a start to the actual schedule. Then you get to go to departures and rinse repeat the entire process again. Yay! You can see here I have arrival and then I didn't label that one. Then you got the departure time, all that good stuff. So it's exactly the same. It's basically just a repeat of that. Just now it's the departures. So the from is all DFW and the to are those airports that I'm cleaning up. Moving into the arrival groomed, this is where I'm starting to really clean up the data to prepare for the actual final schedule. So I take all of the information from my arrival R right here from the to the airline, and I bring it into my groomed file. And you can see that's what I've got right here. I center it so it looks a lot better. And this allows me to come in here and really look for mistakes in the data and clean it up, which is why I didn't do more formulas and other things. It just worked really well for me to progressively clean things up as I work forward. And that way when I get here, if I see an error, I can fix it here. I know exactly which line it's on, so I can go to the arrival, scroll down basically one line away. Hey, there's American 2069. And America 2069 right there. So I can fix it as I go and correct my data. So it made it very easy for me to go back and do error correcting. If when the schedule went live we caught an error or a bug or something that wasn't quite right, it made it very simplistic for us to come back and fix it. So that's why I did it this way, which looks confusing and convoluted, but it worked well for my approach at these things. Now what I have to clean up in this is the time, because the game operates time differently. You can see here there's no space, but the game wants a space. So first I have to search for the letters PM, delete those out of the game, out of the entry, so I get a basic file right there, and then I need to go add the space back in, so a simple concatenate formula. And then I redid that for the 24-hour run just to make it easier to get the actual time frame across the board to convert it all over for the game. So that was the way I pulled that over. And then you can see again, now I've pulled the updated information over here for tweaking and adjusting and cleaning up additional information. And I think, yeah, in this error correcting, because some of these entries might have an odd space in them when I copied them over. Mostly what I'm doing here, you can see I'm searching for a space and I'm trying to delete that space out. You can, there is a specific formula to delete that, but I wanted to search for it in case it was at the beginning, if it was at the end, or in between somewhere for whatever reason if I added it. And that was one of the mistakes I made early on. I would use just a simple trim formula to try and trim out a space at the beginning or the end, and I found it didn't always work right. So I started searching for it and just cutting it off the left, cutting it off the right, and that's basically what I'm doing across the board. Rinse, repeat for departures, except now I'm doing the departure time instead of the arrival. Airlines, airplanes, and then I get to my schedule, which is where I start combining all the information, allowing me to do a lot more. So here's where I copy the complete schedule, starting with the arrivals. Scroll down and look at column G. When you see the departure time flip from 12, in just a second, there it goes to the actual 2300s. That's when we've switched to departures now. You can see it over here. DFW is the departure airport, and over here it's the arrival, which is the second entry. So that's basically how the schedule goes. You copy it in and you end up with the full day, which is a total of 2,066 handles. And that's just it. I've straight copied, centered, everything's ready to go. This gives me another chance to scroll through, look for slashes, any particular errors. And then I do a concatenate, because the old game, Tower 3D Pro, I mentioned this in the configs when I first looked through them, but Tower 3D Pro worked everything as a comma-separated value. So I had to take my nice organized table and ruin it by making it a CSV. Now, yes, you can save the overall file as a CSV, but again, error correcting. And this made it very easy for me to split the schedule into specific hours, because when I wrote my schedules, I don't think I did it on my first few, but if you overload the airport, there's no room for airplanes to land and arrive at, so the airport and the schedule don't work. So it's better if you only input an hour or two of air traffic to control. That way things actually stay busy. Now, the new game probably fixed a lot of those bugs, but this is just, again, what I was doing for the schedule. And then here, I was taking the hour time that I had prepared, and it allowed me to say, okay, if I'm going to do a single hour of the day, here's, let's just do 1 a.m. So 1 a.m. for departures. Arrivals. So 1 a.m., there's only 2 arrivals, and there's no, you have to copy that out, and then you get it going, and then you would come back and select all of those, and then you would come in here and do your 1 a.m. and grab your 1 departure. So 3 airplanes for that hour. I would most likely, in that case, merge several. You can see there was nothing during the 3 a.m. hour at this airport. But that's basically it. I would create text files for each individual hour or hours of control, and that allowed me to go through and put everything together in there. Let me see if I can find my files. DFW, there we go. So this is basically what that folder ends up looking like, and you can see the different hours that I've stacked for it. I would come in here, just create the actual schedule file, copy in the arrivals, save it, go through all the arrivals over the course of the day that I want to save out, then go back, reopen them, add in the departures, and go from there. And then I would populate the overall schedule for the day, my general aviation schedule for the day, my zip file that I would upload. I created a file for some maps and charts, or copied some good maps and charts, and then this file that I'm actually in right now. So you can see I made this one in 2019, and I made a couple corrections up to April of 2020 into COVID. Final things I would do, this is my actual export. This is the final total schedule. Again, I would come in here and do error correcting, because I would be able to see the separation and the differences. I could do a quick Control F for a slash or a space or things like that, and kind of find some easy things. Then I would do a duplicate of one of my, I think of the Schedule C, delete a couple of the stuff I don't need, and then I could come in here and create a simple table. So this is my individual hours. Pulling up somewhere I had a formula that did it, but I think I deleted it once I finished. Yeah, I had to copy over it. So these are mostly just counting the arrival hour and the number of things in there, so just simple counts, and then populating this, which drives the chart. couple of links. I originally built Dubai before this, so I just copied over some of those links. Some basic stuff where I pulled airplanes out of, and then MCO, I had some other interesting stuff to look for working on terminal files. Then kind of an all combined schedule again, easy error correcting, concatenate basic formula, and then again I duplicated the chart because I was trying to do something different. So that is really how I created my schedules. And I called out specifically in this that it doesn't really matter all that much, because in Tower Simulator 3, the files, the functionality, the organization, they're all really the same. There's not much that changes in there. So let me get out of that, and now let me pull up my Tower Simulator 3 folder. And in here, we can go to airports, let's go to LAX, let's go to databases, and I'm using real traffic, real world, so we'll go under Nergies instead of default. And you can see, here's basically all of the same files. Packages is a little different. It's basically just a description for what it is and basically saying, hi, I created this particular file. But I can come in here and replace my airlines file, my frequency file, my GA, schedule, and terminals with the ones that I created. The only difference is I would have to make a few adjustments to things such as terminals, because they're a little different in this with some of the mappings than the ones I've done, and they're basically this one with the gate and the road names, all that stuff. That's a little different than what I had to deal with at mine. So some of these I'll have to adjust and add in, but basically you're just saying at Terminal 1, these are the airports that are, I'm sorry, airports. At Terminal 1, these are the airlines that are allowed there. I don't remember what AAY is. I know Southwest, Sun Country, and Viv. I don't remember Viv. American, Delta, American, United. It's just listing who can go where. And that's it. That's the terminal file. So my schedules could basically be fairly easily adapted to this, as could Eli Grimm's from the schedule builder without any real issues. Let me close out of this. Let's look at the schedules file. If you look at this, it's very similar to mine. There's only a few slight differences where you no longer have to list the 12 a.m. hour for departure. You have an option for special approaches, and you can call them out as cargo or anything else. But otherwise, you still have the color for the livery. You have the call sign, the flight number, the airplane type, from airport to airport. Just add KSFO, KLAX, whatever it is. Some of these you should be able to add fairly easily. You may have to look at some like CYVR, but again, if you take the files that list all of the airports or airlines and all of that out there, it should be in the default or somewhere else. You should be able to find it and copy it over. And then you just build it up, so it makes it a little easier to deal with. And then here it switches over to departures. So you can basically build the schedules there and just tweak it to output here, which is awesome. GA, it's not called GA in local traffic, but the schedule is very similar to that, which does remind me the GA schedules are very different, and building them was a monster of a pain in the past, and this is why you had to basically call out the call signs, and you had to look up if they're a sub airline, which actually has a legitimate listing somewhere, or if it's just a private airplane. So some of these were a big pain in the butt, but it worked. And so you can basically redo these schedules. You can see none of these are filled out, so just leave it as default, color default, special default, doesn't matter. Just give it an arrival, a departure, and move on. So I believe that with some work and some play, you can modify the existing options that are available out there to go ahead and make your own schedules. I didn't know that FlightAware basically went full pay across the board. Maybe there's a way to still access the data. I haven't looked at it in years since I last made a schedule, which I think DFW might have been the last one I made. I don't remember. But anyway, that's the way I did it, as well as the way I started doing it, because Eli Grimm's option was so much easier and it worked really well. I used this for a lot of schedules. I still enjoy playing the ones I made. I still enjoy playing some of the others custom schedules because they did a lot of fun stuff. and you can also go in there and play with it. So I would recommend taking a look through my Tower 3D Pro playlist. Here on YouTube, I made some little scenarios to do. Eli Grimm loved to absolutely beat me up, and I still want to go back and have another shot at his LAX schedule that just completely killed me. But I enjoyed those things. When I was in the groove and doing well, losing was fun because it was the only way I did better and the only way I found new things out. So while Eli Grimm's LAX schedule killed me, it was a ton of fun to learn from, and I took what I learned from that into Philadelphia and was able to actually get better, improve my handling, and I did better when I went back to LAX. So I want to give it some more shots, but there's a lot of fun things you can do in these schedules. So hope that helps you in some way get a start to building schedules. Do not look at what I did in my Excel files and say that's the way to do it. Find your own methods, tweak it a little bit. I'm not going to say, again, as I said earlier, that I'm an Excel wizard. I did what worked for me within my knowledge, and I was able to get it done fairly quickly. I think for Tower 3D Pro, when they released Dubai, I think I cranked a schedule out within 2 days because I had refined my processes well enough to knock it out. It took me, I think, about 4 or 5 hours worth of work to do it, but it was fun. I got a lot of good feedback on it. It was my most popular one just because it was the first one published when the game dropped, or the airport dropped, and I got a lot of good feedback on it, so I was able to make corrections to it very quickly because people were playing it, and so it was fun. Anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.